Okay, the next area I want to talk about is succession planning. And like I said, succession planning can be for employees in your organization, and it could also be for people who are on your board of directors. And I can't underestimate enough the importance of people who are on your board of directors, because these are people who have influence in the community. These are people who can help your organization, can help with the marketing of the organization. So taking a look at who you want to have on your board, who might be going off, is extremely important as well. Although what I am going to focus on here is for employees. It's kind of a, I wouldn't be presented if the answer was, nah, social service agencies don't need it. But typically, in the past, Fortune 500 companies were where a lot of the succession planning started. And it was typically for the higher level people in the organizations. But now you see people doing succession planning all the way down the organization, because people are doing more with less and people are retiring. My organization, in the next 10 years, 50% of the employees at Fayetteville Public Works Commission, and that's 600 employees total, so 300 employees will be eligible for retirement in the next 10 years. That's what keeps me awake at night, making sure that they're, and I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to be one of them. So making sure that I have people in place who are trained and who are ready to take on added responsibilities is extremely important, because a lot of those baby boomers are going to be retiring. And you have to have a good plan in place, because if you don't, you know, you always have that employee that say, boy, so I hope so-and-so never leaves. And then so-and-so says, I'm going to retire, and everybody goes, what are we going to do now? That's the wrong answer. You start succession planning way ahead of time. Even if there is someone who is 25 years old that you just hired, you want to have a succession plan for that position. Because what if that person wins the lottery tomorrow? What if they're in the military and they get transferred? You have to have a plan in place. You have to be proactive rather than reactive, because it's extremely hard to get qualified people, and you want to have a plan in place. And a succession plan is not a promise. That doesn't mean that if somebody's number one on your succession plan that they're going to get the job. But that just means that you have identified people who can compete for that job. Because you may very well go to the outside as well and see who else is out there. But you've identified people who you think have promise and are taking positive steps to have them within your plan for your organization. This is something that I found the doesn't work. Oh.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, it's blue, so it doesn't work. This is from the actually from the Pennsylvania state government, and it's one of the best models that I've seen for succession planning. And I'll go through each one of these very, very briefly. And you see that it's a circle because it never stops. As soon as you get done with the process, you should start all over again, and it should be constantly updated. The first thing you want to do is you want to analyze your agency mission, goals, and your initiatives. Before you can hire somebody, you better know what your organization's about. And it's a good time to take a look at it if you're first starting a succession plan. To say, hey, you know, that vision that we wrote about 5 years ago, let's dust it off and make sure that it's still current. Because you want to make sure that when you're taking a look at the direction that the organization is going and the people that you're going to look at promoting 5, 10 years down the line are in line with whatever the direction that the organization is going, and they're aligned with your vision and mission. You want to determine your future work requirements, not today. Everybody knows what you're going to be doing today or tomorrow, hopefully. But you want to take a look at what are my needs 5, 10 years down the road. Am I going to be expanding my organization? Or am I going to be contracting my organization? Are roles and responsibilities going to change? So you want to have that vision forward, taking a look at what the work requirements are going to be in the organization. Third, you want to analyze your current resources and your projections. Take a look at the people in your organization. Do they have the right training? Are there people who have unbelievable promise? Is there that person that has walked in the door maybe 3, 4 years ago, and you say, boy, in 5 or 6 years, they could be running this place. That's the kind of people you want to identify. those are the people you want to nurture. You don't want to lose them to a competitor or to another organization. You want to give them the tools, and you want to give them the direction so they stay with your organization. You want to do a workforce gap analysis, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. But what that means is, where are those areas where you got a hole? A lot of times it may be on the finance area. You may have one finance person who does the accounting and does everything else, and if that person leaves, are you in trouble? Yeah. Maybe you better do some cross-training. Take a look at doing some things like that. So you want to do a gap analysis to say, where are the biggest holes in the organization that if that person left tomorrow, I'd be in real trouble. You want to identify that. Then you want to develop a proposed organizational plan. Because don't forget, if you're looking at promoting person A into person B's position, well, then you also got to fill person A's position too. So it's encompassing the whole organization. That's why originally when succession planning started, it did start kind of in the upper echelons of the organization, the presidents and vice president levels. But then they found out that, there's a domino effect. And you're moving people up in the organization. There's a real ratchet effect. So you want to make sure that you bring it down to all levels in the organization. At PwC, we do it all the way down to executive assistants, accountants, phone reps on the phone, linemen who are climbing the poles. We have succession plan for every department. So we've moved it all the way down in the organization. And then you've already done kind of a workforce gap analysis. You've identified those positions where there's some gaps. Now you're getting a little bit more finer that you did your organizational plan, and you're looking at your skill gap analysis. Maybe you need someone to get a CPA. That's a skill gap analysis. Maybe you need someone to get, an MSW. That's a skill gap analysis. So you're taking a look at the positions now more individually and finding, again, don't forget, number 2, you're looking at your future work requirements. Because as we know, there are a lot of organizations that if there may be someone in your organization who only has a BSW, but has been there for 10 years, who is more than adequate in doing the job. But if you were going to go replace that person today, you'd want somebody with an MSW because the standards have changed. You need to be able to identify that and have that as part of your plan. Then number 7 is create the workforce solution action plan. That's basically your succession plan. You put that plan together. And I'll go through some forms that I use at my workplace that can help with that. Then you want to implement that solution action plan. Because what that does is, if you have skill gaps and you have people who have promise in the organization, there's a partnership between you and that employee to say, you know what, if you want to advance in this organization, you need to get your MSW. Okay, and we're going to help you because we're going to have tuition assistance for you. Great. That's putting the plan in action to try to get those skills in the organization. A lot of times that doesn't happen, but it's nice if it does. I see you laughing back there, but you're right, a lot of times that doesn't happen. But there are other things. For example, if you don't have tuition assistance, being flexible with work hours to facilitate somebody to go and making it easier to go. There are things that you can do. You can give financial incentives to say, hey, if you go and get this degree, I'll have it in your work plan that you'll get a 10% pay jump as soon as you get your MSW. So there are other kind of incentives that you might be able to do if you think it through and get approval and get the money and get everything else. But it's taking a look at it in a very holistic way to how can you fill those gaps. But you have to identify the need first before you can go to your boss or your board and say, we have a problem. When I went to my board at PwC, because one of the first things I did when I came down there was I took a look at the organization and said, I want to know when they can retire. And when I went to my board and said we could lose 50% of our workforce, that got noticed. They said, well, how about all the other departments? Well, they came back, well, they were going to lose 40%, and they were going to lose 60%, and they were going to lose 50%. So overall, what started out in my organization potentially losing 50%, now when we take a look at the whole company, it's 50% as well. So we had a real problem which we needed to address. And the company said, hey, we have to put some resources behind this, we have to put some money behind this, or we're going to have a crisis in a couple of years. So you have to have your facts and figures. You have to market yourself. You have to market your succession planning. So then what you want to do is you want to start to measure your results in number 9. And again, just like the marketing plan I said, you want to measure your results and you want to refine your process. That's why that arrow goes right back around. Because as you're analyzing your results, you're taking a look at how good the succession plan is working. Were you able to retain those employees? Were they ready for promotion when it came about? What roadblocks were there? Take a look at all those type of things and then go back in and revise your plan again. This is an excellent tool. Like I said, it's one of the best I've seen. Like I said, succession planning is critical because you have retiring baby boomers. You know, you're going to have people retiring at record levels in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. Employees are tending to change jobs more often. When I went through school, your goal was to get with a company, stay there for 30 years, retire, and enjoy life. Now you go, and a lot of schools are saying you're going to change careers 3 or 4 times. But that's something that's different for an employer, because if you're knowing that, and you're not necessarily going to have an employee that would stick with you for 10, 15, 20 years, and you know that if there's a promotional opportunity outside the organization that they'll leave like that, you need to plan for that. How can I retain those employees? And having succession planning is one way in which you can retain employees because they know that there is opportunities down the road for them potentially. And that's a good tool for them to be able to stay in your organization. Today we have a lot of specialists rather than generalists. It's just the way in which business in a lot of cases has gone. Some places still have generalists, but a lot of places have specialists, so it's a lot harder to replace a specialist than it is a generalist. And you can do that in any organization. You have people who are in finance, and they only know, for example, how to go and get bonds and financing. Then you have people who are CPAs, who know capital projects. And then there's people who know expenses. So there are people who are specialists, and that sometimes makes it more difficult when you're taking a look at succession planning, because when you take a look at that skill gap a lot of time is very precise to certain training for certain positions. Changing internal and external needs. Again, you're taking a look at the organization 5, 10 years down the line, and that's a constant moving target. We're having new regulations, new requirements in the organization, new laws, everything which you need to be able to account for, because those are skills that if somebody leaves the organization, they have to bring that with them. And going with some of the chuckling that was there before, the economy has lower staff levels. There's a lot less resources that are out there. It's harder to get money. And that's just the fact of life. You're competing for resources. So that makes it all that much more important that if you have an employee that you want to keep, you want to retain them. Because depending upon the job, and Professor Esmail, I don't know what it is in social services, but in engineering, employee doesn't become fully functional, so to speak, for at least 1.5 years.
I think that's close with us too. When you start a new job and you're trying to get your feet under you, I mean, it differs by discipline, but I really think it is some time. I think a good year, and for some disciplines it's longer. Lawyers I talk to say it's about 3 years before they really feel like they have their feet under. If they're litigators, the ones that are in court, it's a good 3 years before they really feel like they're at the point where they can go into a situation without being concerned about performance. So yeah, it really differs. But I think that's a good number for us. Do you think so? A good year to really feel like you've got your feet under you? Yeah.
So that's a significant investment. I mean, you're basically saying if someone's making $40,000 a year, you're investing $40,000 to just get somebody basically up to speed to be able to be fully functional in that organization and fully productive. So you lose somebody after 3 years, that's a recurring expense which you're going to have. So retaining that employee and having that carrot out there and having a career path for somebody is extremely important. It can be extremely valuable. I like this quote at the bottom. It says, David Applin, which does a lot of executive recruiting, says succession planning is a process of developing talent to meet the needs of the organization now and in the future. And for me, the key word there is process. It is a process. And that thing that I had there before, that chart, was a good example of that. I just want to go over a couple tools to kind of show you what you can do. And and I won't say it's not rocket science. It isn't. A lot of it is common sense, but it's putting it down on paper and having some good analytical skills and taking a look at your organization and what the needs are going to be. Excuse me. This sheet here I would fill out for each position in the organization that you want to create a succession plan for. And it has, for our organization, it has the position, the department, the grade level. You list who the incumbent is, and you have in there the date that they will be eligible for retirement. Now granted, they can win the lottery and leave tomorrow, but typically you'll hone in on a retirement date or another date that you know that they might leave. For example, if they have a spouse who's in the military and you know they have a 5-year deployment, guess what? You have a 5-year window. So you can kind of put a date down there where you think the most likely time that you're going to be filling this position will be. Then we have in there, will the position be filled, yes or no? Will it be combined? Will it be eliminated? Most of the time the answer to that is yes. Will the position be modified? And what I mean by that is, don't forget, we're taking a look 5-10 years down the road what that position might be. So if that person isn't going to retire for 5 years, what do you think that position is going to be? Is it going to be exactly like it is today? Then the position won't be modified. But if you're looking at upping the minimum requirements for that position, you're looking at modifying that position slightly. And you want to earmark that here as something for somebody to do. Then you have overlap required. In an ideal world, you'd like to have an overlap for almost any job. If somebody's going to retire in a year, you'd like to have somebody in place for like 3-4 months to be able to mentor with that person and follow them and be able to do the job. A lot of times you can't do that, but again, if you can, you want to have that identified. Then you say, will you do an inside and outside search? Some positions you'll say, no, we want to promote from within. Other times you want to say, yeah, we are going to go to the outside. But don't forget, if you go to the outside, you have to do advertisements, you have to do interviews, you have to do a lot of things, so there's a lot of costs associated with doing an outside search. Then you want to list your special requirements, CPA or a PE, which is a professional engineer's license, MSW. You want to have certain requirements up there. What is going to be your minimum requirement? Again, that may not be what the current incumbent has, but that's when you replace that job, what you're going to require. And then you want to list your succession candidates in order of overall readiness. And we limit it to 3. Sometimes we have 4. But typically, if you could identify your top 3 candidates for a position, that's usually pretty good. And I highlight that in yellow there. And it can be an outside candidate. You can take a look at your organization and say, you know what? The people I have, I got a retirement coming in 2 years, and it's going to probably be 5 years before they're ready. I better be ready to go outside. So your number 1 candidate might be someone on the outside. Now again, that can be modified. Somebody goes and gets training, gets a degree, you bring a new person in the organization, that could always change. But hopefully you're not in a position where the number 1 candidate is an outside candidate. Then what you want to do is you want to list their name, what their current position is, and then the key one there you'll see is readiness, 0 to 6 months, 1 to 2 years, 2+ years. Now again, that's taking a look at it in an objective fashion to say, when do I really think this person could step into this job where I lose no productivity? There is no 1-year lost time, that they are ready. And you take a look at them and say, well, they got a year to go to get their MSW. Well, their time frame might be 1 year that they're going to be ready. So you want to have that down there. And that's a real key when you're taking a look, because that's what's going to determine that if that person's going to retire in 5 years and you're going to have somebody ready in 2, well, that's pretty good. But if it's the other way around, somebody's going to be ready in 5 and they're retiring in 2, you have a problem.
I'm sorry, so you're doing this without that candidate knowing that he or she is eligible for that position. This is just what you see in this candidate, that you might potentially approach them, him or her. And
Yes.
say, oh.
A lot of times it's based upon the evaluations. It's based upon the supervisor's evaluation of the position. A lot of times you'll ask the incumbent person, When we do our succession plan, when my boss comes to me and says, okay, Dave, I want you to do it, who do you think
Right.
can fill the position? Now, he or she may have a different view than I do, but I will give my opinion. And I'll say, well, I think so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. Well, he says, well, how about so-and-so? Did you think about them? Oh, no, I think they might, because again, I'm probably looking more just in my part of the organization rather than somebody over here. My boss might have a bigger, wider view of people who are available, but you still ask the incumbent who they think. You say, oh, well, so-and-so, I gave him a special project last time, they did really, really well. I gave her this project, but really excelled, had a lot of promise. So a lot of that kind of stuff you can have in there when you're putting your people down. That's why we kind of earmark 3 people, but if you have 4 because there's somebody else, add a 4th. And there's no science to saying 3 or 4. But then what you want to do is you want to rate them on competencies, each individual person. And what we have here for our organization is we list technical skills, communication skills, time management skills, administrative skills, leadership skills, and finance and budget skills. And then there's space down below for some specific skills depending upon the position. So those upper ones we want everybody rated on. And then what we do is we say that that's a strength for that person, they're proficient, which means they're okay, or it's a developmental need. So this is a real key, because then what's going to happen, and a lot of organizations have had this discussion, and we had it at our organization when I brought succession planning to Fayetteville, because I did it in my previous employer, was do you let the employee know or not? Is this something that you just keep? Now you may say, hey, why don't you go get some training, or why don't you do this? Or do you actually communicate that to the employee? Positive and negatives both ways. The positive is you're letting somebody know that there's interest, you see potential in them, and that can help you retain an employee. The negative is if you go to them and say, hey, we think of you really highly for this position, that position becomes available and there's somebody else who gets the job, you might lose them. So there's positives and negatives both ways. I tend personally to say you want to involve people. And you want to do it in the correct way where you're saying, hey, this is not a guarantee of the job, but we see potential in you, and here are some steps that you can take to compete for that job. Not get it, but compete. And a lot of that is dependent upon this skills analysis, taking a look at these competencies. Because if there is a developmental need area, you want to say, you know what, there's a lot of competition out there, but if you go and get your CPA, that would really put you in a lot better position to compete for this job. It's a lot better to tell that employee that and have them potentially say, you know what, I don't want to get into management. I don't want to get my CPA. It's good that you know that. But then if they do want to go get that, you know that you have an employee who's engaged and wants to get that particular training to be able to compete for that job. So I think there's a lot of strength and a lot of good reasons to be able to communicate that to the employee. Now this is something that I have each department do, and it's kind of a roll-up for me as the Chief Operating Officer to take a look at where do we have potential holes. Because if you remember, I said you want to take a look at skills gap, which is basically on the first sheet where you have those developmental needs. But this now is your workforce gap. This is where you want upper management to really, really concentrate on when they're taking a look at holes in the organization. So what you do, and you can tell I work for a utility, Pauline Powers, Willie Waters, Evan Electric, okay? But what you're doing is you're listing each position with the incumbent, and what you do is the first two ones, the position status and criticality. Your position status has a rating of 1 to 4, okay, with 4 being the vacancy likely within a year, all the way down to 1, which is 10 years or more. And then criticality is, it's that job I need someone hitting the ground running. I can't afford any overlap. And then you go all the way down to moderate. You can have an extended training period for certain positions. That's okay. They can do a lot of on-the-job training. Some jobs require that. Other jobs you want somebody to hit the ground running. Then what you do is you take a look at the number of staff that are ready now and the number of staff that are ready in 1 to 2 years. And the way this works, the way I've set this matrix up, is you take your position status plus your criticality and minus the number of staff ready now and minus the number of staff ready in 1 to 2 years. And you come up with a number. So you can see in the first job, you have a very critical position that's going to be vacant within a year. Somebody has to hit the ground running, and I have absolutely nobody in the organization who's ready. So that gets a rating of 8, which means that's the highest priority. That's critical for me. That job just stands right out. Then you go down to one of the other jobs, let's say sample number 7. You have a position that he's there. You have old Larry sitting there. He's going to be in that position. He's not going to retire for 10 years. It's a position that I can have on the job training. It's not a real critical position that I need somebody to hit the ground running. And I got 3 candidates that are going to be ready in 1 to 2 years. Well, guess what? That actually has a -1 rating. So that job, as far as me in senior management, gets a little, it doesn't mean that I forget about it, because I still want to develop people. But I'm taking a look at those ones in green saying, those are the ones I really need to concentrate on because I have serious holes in my organization. And those are my workforce gaps. That's the things that are going to keep me up at night. Because I know that I'm going to lose somebody potentially to retirement in a year or 2, and I don't have anybody in the pipeline ready to fill that position. That's not a good position to be in. So this is a good tool to have that you can update, because somebody new in the organization, that's why this is an ongoing process, that if you have somebody new come in the organization, you say, boy, I think they're ready now because we just hired really, really smart. We hired somebody who went to UNC Pembroke, they got an MSW, and they're ready to fill a higher position tomorrow. Great, well that changes the whole rating system. So you want to constantly update this thing. Most organizations, at a minimum, take a look at these once a year, but I like to take a look at them a little bit sooner, especially if we have a new hire coming into the organization or somebody retires, to just kind of take a look at it and see, because a lot of times, especially if you're putting it down in the organization, you have that ratchet effect. So-and-so replaces so-and-so, and then somebody has to replace that person, somebody has to replace that person. So one vacancy can actually create 4 or 5 vacancies which you need to fill. So it's a good thing to kind of take a look at the organization, because what you'll find in a lot of organizations, if there are people with high potential, they may be on 4 or 5 succession plans. You might have someone who could fill 5 different positions. And if they get promoted, they're just removed from 4 of them. So you better reassess that plan, especially if they were your leading candidate. So it's good to dust those off. And then this is just kind of a summary sheet where you can take your 3 candidates, you take your individual positions in the organization, and you put your top 3 candidates. And you can see, for example, the engineering manager position, I have 2 top candidates, and I have outside as number 3. That means that I only have 2 candidates that I really think have the potential to fill that position. You go to the office supervisor's position, number 1 is outside candidate. Now what that probably means that person may be retiring very soon, and I don't have anybody who's in the pipeline ready to take that responsibility on, so I'm looking at going outside first. Unless I can take my number 2 or number 3 candidates, get them some accelerated training, and maybe they can move up. That's ultimately what you would like to do, because you have a lot of knowledge in the organization and you'd like to retain that knowledge. But you identify those holes when you put it down like this, and this is where you can see that somebody may be on 3 or 4 different succession plans. And you say, geez, I got somebody for every position. Same 2 people for every job. That's not a good position to be in either. So this is a good tool as well when you're taking a look at it. So after you prepare all your documents, you want them to ultimately identify the most critical positions to be filled. And those may not necessarily be the most senior positions in the organization. Again, you're relying on that matrix and you're identifying what the most critical positions are. And you're finding the positions that you're going to fill first. And a lot of reasons. Retirement, somebody, like I said, is involved in the military, or you just know someone says, hey, I'm gonna go start traveling and next year I'm not gonna be working here. You wanna know that. You want to identify what positions may be filled from outside the organization, because if you are going to have those, you're going to want to build a relationship, for example, with a college or a trade school. To build that relationship so when you go hire that position, if outside candidate's your number one candidate, you have a place to go. You know that you can get qualified candidates because you've taken a look at, for example, the curriculum of the school. Because in teaching this class before, I know that different social work schools have different specialties. And if a certain school has a certain specialty, but that may fit one job in my organization, but it may not fit another job in my organization. So I may need to have a relationship with multiple schools depending upon what position I'm filling. And having that relationship with that school as far as recruiting, when you have those positions that you know you're probably going to go to the outside for, is extremely important. Then you want to identify areas where individual candidates have some skills analysis, have some skills gaps, and you want to work with those employees to fill those gaps. Tell them what they need. Communicate to them as part of their career development in the organization. Find out if they're interested, because like I said in my other example, nothing worse than thinking that someone's perfect for the job, and you go to them and say, I never want to get in supervision. Yeah, but no, I don't want it. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And you don't want to lose that person because they're a good employee, but they just don't want to take that next jump. So having that kind of communication with an employee is valuable as well. And then you want to take a look at your overall workforce plan, find out where you have some strengths and find out where you have some weaknesses in that plan, and try to beef it up wherever you need to. So we can turn off the camera and I can take some questions.